Welcome back to the YOUniverse Podcast. I'm your host, Shanleigh, and today we're diving into a topic that I feel we all can benefit from: effective de-escalating communication. Whether in our personal relationships or professional settings, conflict is inevitable. What matters most is how we handle these moments of tension, stewing frustration, or opposing opinions. In this episode, we will explore some scenarios that we may commonly encounter, break down the techniques to navigating them gracefully, but also offer strategies to sustain that healthy communication. So let's get into it. So we really want to start by understanding the importance of de-escalation communication. De-escalation communication is all about reducing the intensity of a conflict and guiding conversations towards resolution as opposed to escalating it. It's a skill that can transform both personal and professional interactions, helping us to remain calm, compassionate, and solution-focused. And honestly, who really doesn't want that? The core principle here is to understand that our goal is not to win the argument, but to preserve the relationship and find a path forward that respects both parties. Now, let's look at how this plays out in a real-life scenario. So for scenario one, we're going to focus on a personal relationship, disagreeing with a partner. Dun, dun, dun. Imagine you're having a disagreement with your partner. The conversation's getting heated because emotions are high, and suddenly it feels like neither of you is really actually listening to the other. How do we de-escalate this situation? Now, what I'm about to say might seem obvious, but you'd be surprised how difficult it actually is to implement in the moment. So here are some key techniques. Start with pausing. Take a breath. Taking a moment to pause and breathe really does help avoid saying something that we might regret later. I don't know about you, but I've been very guilty of that before. So this brief moment of stillness allows us to refocus on our intention. We're solving the issue, not just reacting to it. Then, of course, once we've taken that moment to breathe, acknowledge the other person's feelings. One of the most powerful tools in de-escalating a situation is validating the other person's emotions. Phrases like, "I hear you," or "I understand that you're upset," do show empathy and help the other person feel seen. Use I statements instead of you statements. When you shift your language from accusatory, "you always do this," to "I feel frustrated when," it reduces the defensive reaction and opens that door for a more honest conversation. So now we've acknowledged the other person's feelings. Now we want to find that common ground. End the conversation on a note that acknowledges that both of you have a shared goal here. I know that we both want to understand one another better, and I'm willing to work on that. This reminds the two of you that you're on the same team, and it's not one person having to do something for the other. So now we've talked about a personal relationship, simple key things for communication, but now we're going to focus on professional relationships, although similar, very different, less emotional, maybe in some circumstances. So you have a conflict with a colleague or supervisor. We've all been there. Now let's switch gears. Picture a situation where you disagree with that colleague or your supervisor during a meeting. It's intense, all eyes are on you and the other person that you're arguing with. What's your next move? Well, here are some, I think, effective techniques for de-escalation in that workplace. Stay neutral and avoid personal attacks. When you stick to the facts and you avoid letting your emotions take over, you're always going to be in the right. For example, instead of saying, "your idea won't work," try something like, "I'm concerned about how this might impact our timeline. Can we explore other options?" That not only hears what they have to say and still keeps it welcomed, but it also suggests that we need other options on the table so that we're not left high and dry. If plan A or B falls through the cracks, then we have a C and D plan. And from there, practice active listening. I know that's hard when emotions are high, but show that you're genuinely listening by nodding or using affirmations like "I see" or "go on" or "continue." This really does help build trust, and it indicates that you value the other person's perspective. But also, don't be afraid to repeat something that they've said and ask for clarification of your understanding. And it shows that you're listening. Then, defer the discussion. If the conversation is getting too heated, it's okay to suggest taking a break. You might say, I think we're both very passionate about this. How about we revisit this when we've had a moment to just collect our thoughts? I don't know about you, but this gives everybody a chance to just cool down and think more clearly with less emotion attached to it from a later perspective. Then from there, stay solution oriented. Redirect the focus from a problem to actually finding the solution. Ask open-ended questions. What can we do to make this work for everyone? This not only keeps the conversation productive, but it also shifts the energy from conflict to collaboration. There's no better way to unite during a moment of conflict than focusing on a collaborative effort. Okay, so we've talked about personal relationships with a partner. We talked about professional. So let's talk about communication with a family member. This, in my opinion, is the most difficult one to navigate. Family dynamics can be very complex and emotional, which means that conflicts really do escalate easier than anything else or anyone else that we're communicating with. So let's break it down to a scenario. Let's imagine that you're in a disagreement with a parent or a sibling. Maybe it's about a sensitive topic or a difference in opinions that keeps coming up. In these moments, it's easy to let those old wounds and frustrations bubble to the surface. We've all been there. So how do you de-escalate the situation with somebody who knows exactly how to push your buttons when you're in that heated moment? Here are some strategies to consider. First and foremost, lead with empathy. We've talked about this before. Family members often come from a place of love, even when they don't know how to express it well. And try to lead the conversation with empathy by reminding yourself that their reactions are often shaped by their own experiences and concerns. A statement like, I know you're saying this because you care and I appreciate that, can really go a long way with softening the tone and the energy in the room. Then once we have softened that tone, it makes it easier to establish boundaries, right? And that's okay. Remember, it's okay to set boundaries if a conversation is getting way too intense or personal. You might want to say something like, I'd love to have this conversation, but we need to keep it respectful. Or let's take a break and revisit this when we're both more calm. Boundaries are not about shutting people out. They're simply there to create a safe space for open dialogue. That is the whole point of effective communication. And a big one, and I think it's the most important, is avoid bringing up the past. When we argue with family, it is so tempting to bring up the past grievances that have nothing to do with the current issue. So try to stay focused on the present conversation instead. Stick to the issue that's at hand and avoid statements like, you always do this, or remember that time when you said. This only escalates emotions and derails the focus of the discussion to the point where you might even forget what you're actually arguing about in the first place, and it ends up actually changing the narrative of the argument. Another one, humor. It's a beautiful thing, but sometimes humor can, diffuse a tense moment with a family member, and other times it can escalate it. So feel what's appropriate. A lighthearted comment or a gentle joke can break up that tension. But just remember who's on the other side there and make sure that the humor isn't at the expense of anybody else. So keep it kind and inclusive. Again, we talked about breaking, taking a breath, but take a time out. If those emotions are too high in the moment, it's okay to press pause. Let them know that you care about the relationship, but you need some space to think and cool off. Say something like, I care about what you're saying, and I really want to respond thoughtfully. Can we take a little break and come back to this? That's okay. It just says, hey, you are important enough for me to just collect my words so that we can keep the respect mutual. And then lastly, the power of nonverbal communication. Something we often overlook is our impact of our nonverbal communication cues. Our body language, facial expressions, tone. It can either, escalate or defuse a situation. So for example, maintaining an open posture, avoiding crossed arms, keeping a calm tone can really reduce the tension in the room. The tone, I think, being the most important above all. And sometimes it's really not about the words that you say, but it's how you're saying them. So remember to be mindful of your energy and the way that that translates in your physical appearance. So really, what is the role of mindfulness in communication? In my opinion, mindfulness plays a huge role in maintaining a graceful communication during tense moments. Practicing mindfulness means that you are being aware of your emotions, you're acknowledging them without judgment, and you're responding intentionally rather than impulsively. This mindset can be the difference between reacting in anger and responding with empathy. So you see how they all kind of tie together. And lastly, here are my final thoughts. As we wrap this up, I really want to emphasize that effective de-escalating communication or de-escalation communication is a skill that requires active practice. It's okay if you don't get it right the first time, but really what matters is that you're committed to that growth and the willingness to try again. Whether it's in your personal life or your professional relationships, these techniques can really help navigate those conflicts with a little more grace, but also it allows for us to foster deeper connections with others. So remember, pause and breathe. Validate the other person's feelings. Use I statements. Stay solution focused, but more importantly and above all, keep practicing mindfulness. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Have you used some of these techniques in your own life? What has worked for you? What hasn't worked for you? Let's continue the conversation on social media and in the comments section. And don't forget to tune in next Wednesday for the latest episode. Stay true, stay brave, and always keep moving forward. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next week, the same time here on the YOUniverse Podcast.